Welcome, everybody. My name is Tony Frontier, and here is where we are headed in the next 40 minutes or so. I saw the questions that were coming up in the chat. We're going to broadly address a lot of those elements. Then I'll let you know where to find specifics as well. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about broadly the challenge of AI in schools. I'm going to give you a quick introduction to the AI Center and the work that we do and why. We're going to talk about 4 guiding principles for school leaders, choices and action steps from my book that just came out a week and a half ago, AI with Intention, my 6th book, my 5th with ASCD. We're going to talk about some guiding principles for teachers and strategies and aligned action steps. And I'm just going to highlight a few of those strategies and action steps. This will be a 10,000-foot view. That's the nature of a short webinar with lots of people from around the country. There's a lot of detail, action steps, really specific strategies, tools, resources, and some of those will be sent to you in a follow-up email and links to resources. So here we go. I want you to ask yourself this question. Suppose there was a total reorganization of global resources and every student could have his or her own tutor. Here are the options that students are given. Option 1, tutor has to do anything the student asks. Homework, projects, the student simply has to tell the tutor what to do. Option 2, tutors won't answer any questions posed by the teacher. They won't do any homework. They won't do any assigned tasks. They'll only answer the student's own questions. Now, when I ask this in workshops and give a little time for some buzz, almost always, teachers come back and say, my students would choose option 1, particularly middle school, high school. But then I ask, what would be the result of that? And it's pretty much consensus that it would result in less learning, right? More dependence. Students would get work done, they'd accomplish tasks, but they would work very little. This is the scenario that we're faced with today. So let's push a little bit further into AI tools and their capacity. AI tools have the capacity to plan and accomplish almost any academic task. And in a few years, that'll be a definitive statement. AI tools have the capacity to support effective teaching and learning. I've seen it, and I've read the research, and I've worked with teachers. Amazing things can happen. But AI tools also have the capacity to undermine effective teaching and learning. So as we think about the costs and benefits of AI tools, right, we really have to think about how are these tools used. I think we spent a few years kind of saying, hey, let's block these tools, or hey, let's buy this resource or that resource. And we really need to move beyond that notion of what and really push into how should they be used. So the most recent research on when and how do AI tools undermine or support student learning? There's some really clear pictures starting to emerge. AI tools undermine student learning when students use superficial prompts. They just type in the question their teacher gave them, and they parrot back the answer. There are significant problems with cognitive ease and the illusion of understanding. AI tools make the work easier. Kids think they understand, but they're actually produce work of less quality. And then when that tool is removed, they've actually learned less. And then final piece, when students become reliant on or dependent on AI tools, research showing that once that tool is removed, the skills kind of evaporate or disappear. So we need to think about ways to avoid those, certainly, but we need to really hone in on skills and strategies that can be used when AI tools appear to support student learning. AI tools can support student agency, student learning, only when they're used in specific ways. And these include things like prompting AI tools to, don't give me the answer till I've finished the work. Go slowly, one step at a time. Ask me clarifying questions. Provide short, concise answers, for example. In study, and this second one was college students, but students learned twice as much in less time when they used an AI tutor that was designed in very specific ways to do those elements in the beginning of the slide there, and designed specifically around course learning goals. So the intentionality, right, of how we use these tools is what is going to determine their effectiveness. So when Garth and Don asked me to join work with First Education, I said, I'm very interested. Let's pursue this, but it's not going to be, here's an AI tips and tricks center. We go into detail about how to use these tools, but we have to transcend superficial uses. So when we say AI, we mean artificial intelligence. We mean using those tools in ways that are aligned and intentional to support effective teaching, and using those tools, teaching students to use those tools with agency and integrity. So we can't just focus on the tool any longer, and we can't just block the tool. We can't just tell kids you shouldn't do that. We need to empower teachers and learners to use these tools effectively. And we're interested in how do we hit that intersection point, right? How do we hit that point where teachers and students know when it's okay to use AI tools, when it's not okay, and how to use those tools to ensure learning occurs. So our vision then, and then we're going to move on to some meat, but here's how we talk about alignment, right? Aligning priorities for teaching with students' opportunities to learn, and intentionally help students prioritize and align their strategy and effort to learn. And we'll look at some action steps and some specific examples about how that can happen. And then I've done about 20 focus groups in the last 3 weeks with students in a whole bunch of high schools. They're using these tools. They are everywhere. I'm hearing from many students outside of their English classes with some instruction around how to use AI tools. Their teachers are largely mute about here's how you should use these tools. So absent that, students are reverting to, plugging things in and getting answers and playing games to avoid detection tools. So students need to learn, right, how to use these tools. We need to spark that agency that they all came with in kindergarten. And we need to teach them how to use these tools with integrity, but we play a role in that as well. So the book, again, that just came out, I'd be remiss, right, if I didn't give a quick plug. And John Hattie and I had a lot of back and forth as I was pulling the manuscript together. I'm a certified visible learning trainer through Michigan State a number of years ago. And John's been someone who's been supportive of my work. So, right, it comes down to how these tools are used. And what's really important, there are a lot of people out there with expertise in technology or AI who are out there telling teachers how to use these tools. The technology will be transparent very soon. What I mean by that is you don't need to know programming language, right, to use AI tools. Your effectiveness with using those tools comes down to your capacity to interact with them in ways that support what we know about good teaching, what we know about how students learn, and how to support students' efforts to use those tools in those ways. So in the book, I call on a lot of research around effective teaching and learning that I've talked about throughout my career. So if intention is something that is important, how do we define it? Here's what I mean by intention. Drawing on some others' research, intentional learning, right? They're cognitive processes that have learning as the goal rather than an incidental outcome. Kids can use AI tools to create projects and explore and discover. I'm talking about how do we use these tools in intentional ways where the goal is not just completing a task, but the goal is deeper learning. Intentional teaching, it refers to how do we align, right, success criteria, feedback, learning strategies, teaching methods. How do we align those components that we know are critical to support effective teaching and learning into a coherent whole? So to use AI with intention, right, means teachers and students can put forth, strategy and effort in specific ways to use AI tools to support intentional teaching and intentional learning. And the essence of the book and the work we do through the center is how do we make that happen? So in the book, I have 4 guiding principles for school leaders. You'll get an email when we're done that has these next few slides and some other resources. So guiding principles, we need to lead by learning. We have to make a choice between are we going to be a learning organization or reactive? Taking a transformational approach, there is no doubt AI is a second order change, represents a transformation in how we interact with knowledge and information. So how do we align transformational leadership behaviors to those ends? One of the handouts, one of the things I'll send in the email is a link to an article around transformational leadership in an era of AI. Emphasize integrity. That came up a lot in people's questions that I saw when you came in. I talk about the importance, the distinction between cheating and academic integrity. And those are 2 very different things that need to be addressed in very different ways. I advocate for more of a humanist approach that emphasizes integrity. Been doing a lot of work with schools on that topic. Fidelity before efficiency, right? How do we ensure that we're using tools in ways that are effective, not just efficient or automating tasks? There are downsides to getting that wrong. I'm going to share just a little bit about a couple of those. Next piece, some guiding principles for teachers. Standing in students' shoes, we need to see those tools, AI tools, as they do. So how do we engage in empathetic design versus non-empathetic design? Knowing your purpose, how do we support student learning, create those contexts where learning is most valued rather than compliance? Prompting AI tools intentionally, ways of creating clarity rather than clutter, and then using AI tools for intentional learning. How do we support student agency in ways that help them use AI tools to learn, not just accomplish tasks? So let me share a few ideas around aligned and intentional teaching. Okay, why aligned and intentional teaching? Well, we know that uses of AI tools that undermine effective teaching and learning look very different for teachers than they do for students. And I'll talk more about students in a bit. But for teachers, right, the risk is that their interactions with AI tools are too vague. Generic prompts resulting in lesson ideas, rubrics, other instructional resources that are really no better than if you just did a quick Google search for rubrics on something or lesson ideas and then selected a random link or something from a teacher file sharing site. So we've got to be specific and we've got to be clear. A challenge that I know teachers are facing is this is a question, right? I hear often from teachers or in chat rooms or from principals conveying, right? Teachers are feeling overwhelmed and they want to know, is there an AI tool that can do, create tests, do lesson plans, et cetera? And the answer to that is yes. In fact, the answer to that is most, there are tools and resources that can do that. Just Google Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, at very low cost. But then I also hear this question, right? Help, my students are using AI to do their work. What should I do? And a lot of the questions that you had that came up in the chat, I would say align to one of these two bins. There's perhaps some irony here, right? That teachers are looking for ways to use these tools to create efficiencies, and clearly students are as well. So both groups then, they're just looking for ways to use AI tools as tools have been used throughout human history to accomplish work of value more efficiently. So as we think about how those tools are put to use, right, we really do need to be clear, well, what do we value, right? Is it for students, is it getting the work done? Is it getting the grades and points? Or is it learning? And what are our intentions as we approach those tools? So here's a guiding principle. Fidelity before efficiency, right? How do we empower educators to use AI tools to support intentional teaching and learning? Action steps, I'm going to share briefly what the twin sins of AI integration are. I'm going to tell you what fidelity, efficiency, automaticity, and effectiveness are. And in the book, I've got some resources and tools to walk through a process with your staff to discern some of these different components. So we're in a phase now with AI. We need to move beyond, can AI do that? And really ask, what are the benefits and the costs of how we put these tools to use? The twin sins of curriculum design. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with understanding by design and Grant Wiggins and Jay McTighe's twin sins of activities without understanding and coverage without understanding. The first sin, efficiency without fidelity, right? We gain efficiencies in using AI tools to produce instructional resources, tests, quizzes, lesson plans, rubrics, but those aren't aligned to our priorities for teaching or students' learning needs. The second sin, automaticity without fidelity, right? Tasks are automated in a way that undermines teachers' capacity to understand or be responsive to students' learning needs. The worst case scenario with AI, and I'm hearing examples of this happening already, are teachers use AI to create lessons, assignments, tasks. Kids use AI to accomplish those lessons, assignments, or tasks. Teachers use AI to grade those lessons, assignments, or tasks. And if you step back, it looks like teaching is learning is going on here, right? The grade book is being filled. But in reality, we're just training AI models. So we've got to be very intentional then about how do we transcend that trap. So fidelity before efficiency. If we create scenarios where we're trying to fill gaps, okay, with resources that don't fit, it doesn't matter how effective or if it's automatic. So that block there with the hole in it, that might be a student's learning need, it might be an assessment question, it might be a rubric, it might be any number of things, right? But if the solution we have doesn't have fidelity to what our intention is, right? It really doesn't matter if we're efficiently churning out those wooden ping pong balls. It doesn't matter if we've created an automatic way to churn out those little wooden ping pong balls. They don't fit. In fact, they end up being a detriment to student learning, right? So we can't just ask ourselves, how do we do things more efficiently? How can we automate things? We have to start with fidelity, right? How is this aligned to our priorities for teaching and learning? And some ways we can ensure that's the case, transparency, right? If teachers are using AI tools, I'm an advocate for they need to be documenting how they are putting those tools to use. If you're putting together a quiz, if you're putting together an instructional resource, right? I need to be able to retrace my steps so it's clear where that tool or resource came from. Explainability, anything that's generated through an AI tool or resource, anything we bring forward to our students, you should be able to explain it, right? To a colleague, you should be able to explain it to a student. I've seen a lot of teachers using rubrics generated from AI, and then it's after the fact they realize it wasn't well aligned, or creating instructional resources, quizzes, etc. We've got to be sure we're tending to each of these different components. In the book, I've got specific sets of questions that we can go through to create parameters around when and how teachers can use these tools, and how they might discern, right? Is this an effective use versus is it simply more efficient, or am I creating something automatic? We have to prompt AI tools intentionally. If we're not prompting them intentionally, it just produces randomness. So action steps here around prioritizing before prompting. I'll show you that in a moment. But then they need to be prompted in specific ways. When AI tools are prompted in specific ways, I can't tell you how many times my jaw has dropped when I've seen the results. But the key is how we talk to those tools. First, if you have good curricular components in place, instructional frameworks, clear curriculum, clear learning goals, if you have those pieces in place, you've done about 97% of the lifting that's required to use AI tools in really intentional ways. Because if we're clear, right, about what these components are and how they align to and support our students' learning needs, then we can direct AI tools to produce resources that are aligned to our needs, right? Serve our students' learning needs, rather than simply, well, that this is what came out, of the AI tool. So some non-examples of prompting AI tools intentionally, create a rubric for 8th grade writing, make a test for my students on World War II, create 6 project options, write a resource or write an explanation to my students. What we need to do, these are going to give us gobbledygook, okay? What we need to do is provide context, explicit instructions and examples. We need to be really painfully specific, and establish process and product constraints. And here's what I mean by that. Take a look at that prompt. All right. And it shows you now with the context, the instructions, specificity, and process and product constraints. Right. That notion of very clearly aligning standards, uploading curricular documents or syllabus or unit overviews, especially if they're really designed well, it is astounding what AI tools will give you. But if we're vague, if we're general, if we treat that AI tool as though it's kind of, omniscient and omnipotent, it's going to give us gobbledygook. It'll look good from a surface level, but it's not going to be aligned to our students' learning needs. So, learning with agency and integrity, what does that look like? So earlier I talked about the risk of teachers' use of AI tools is that they're too vague. The risk of students' use of AI tools is that they're too specific. Okay, so for students, the risk is that their interactions with AI tools are just task specific. Their superficial prompts are identical to the questions they've been assigned. They upload homework problems, take questions, take photos of math problems, pop essays into AI tools, and the tools spit out the answers. And plagiarism detection tools or AI detection tools are a resource, but by no means are they foolproof. I've heard some pretty amazing stories from students in all directions. Students talking about what they do to trick those tools. They seem to have it pretty well figured out. But also examples students have shared with me of using tools like frequently and never getting caught, or using tools occasionally and getting caught when they weren't using a tool. So we have to have a more comprehensive approach. And I've got a link to an article about really specific things you can do to support academic integrity in an era of AI in the handout that I'll email to you. So here's my concern, right? The greatest threat, it might not be that students use AI tools to cheat, but that they receive answers from AI tools and think that they've learned. Okay, even more debilitating, a fear of mine, students come to see intelligence as something that is external, instantaneous, and effortless, rather than something that is developed through a process that is internal, circuitous, and effortful. So the stakes of getting this right, I think, are really, really high. So what are some things we can do to pull these pieces into check? Well, one of the action steps I talked about is emphasizing integrity, a choice between humanism versus behaviorism. We need to teach students what integrity is, and it's not just it's not purely like an ethical issue. I know the Center for Academic Integrity, great work, and they really emphasize honor and trustworthiness. And yes, we need those things, but kids need to be taught how to act with academic integrity. And it can't just happen when they're doing big research papers. But we also play a role in designing assessments that ensure the integrity of the evidence. So if you expect it, teach it. I've reviewed about 50 academic integrity policies in the last year and a half. The vast majority of them, they're called academic integrity. That's the name of the policy. Then it defines what cheating is. Then it talks about the consequences for cheating. And it never really talks about what integrity is. I give examples in the book. We should articulate expectations for students, for administrators, for teachers, to parents, and to support academic integrity. So a reality of the academic integrity and cheating issue is this. Sorry. For some reason, the next word isn't popping up there. Up there it is. From 2002 to 2015, research, lots of students, thousands of students, about 65% of high school students report having cheated in the previous month. 2024, it's about exactly the same, okay? So AI doesn't seem to have created more cheating, but it certainly seems to have made it easier. So if we're trying to address the cheating and integrity issue, we got two big questions we need to ask. The question we need to ask around cheating is, did the student actually do the work? And that's an important question, and it needs to be addressed essentially through kind of behaviorist means. But what always matters, and the better we do with how we answer the second question, the less cheating there will be. Does this work accurately represent the student's skill and understanding? If you take two Venn diagrams, what we know about effective teaching and what we know about minimizing cheating, they're like the same exact thing, okay? So yes, we need to tend to issues of cheating, but the best way to get there is to emphasize integrity. And here's how I make a distinction between the two. If we are going to tend to this issue through cheating, we've got to spend a lot of time, effort, and energy right, in conflict and investigations, et cetera. And sometimes we have to do that. I would rather focus on these elements related to integrity. Okay? How do we create those cultures where kids understand the purpose isn't just to get the grade, the purpose is to learn. If you knew this already, I wouldn't expect you to be here. It's okay to not know. My bread and butter professional expertise is creating opportunities that will help you engage in productive struggle and learn. And that's where I want to invest time, effort, and energy in the conversation around how do we address issues of student integrity and cheating. So what are some things that we can do? And again, you'll get a link to this paper that I wrote that was posted in the Cult of Pedagogy blog a few weeks ago. Right? Have we really aligned assessments to important outcomes? Have we aligned those important outcomes to opportunities to learn? Okay, when I talk to students about why do they cheat, they say almost to a T, they're busy, they've got other things. Okay. But they'll say, well, it's busy work. They'll say the teacher isn't clear about what they are, what they're looking for, like what are most important attributes of quality. They think their teacher is unfair. They think their teacher didn't teach them. They've asked for help and haven't gotten it. And I'm not saying those are the only reasons students cheat, but I'm saying those are some things that we need to turn that lens back on ourselves because we have some control over them. So evidence of transparency is important related to integrity. We should be asking our students to document the resources they used, not just on big papers, right? All the time. Kids are told to, cite, use text evidence when they answer questions, but they're rarely asked to cite, those resources or their book. So we just need to make it a habit, not because I think you're cheating, because it's just good academic practice to be able to retrace your steps. Second piece, explainability. When students turn in work, it's not done. We don't need to give students a grade immediately. Okay? Explainability. Okay, that assignment you uploaded last night or that you just turned in on the, half slip of paper that I just passed around the room, what's the most important idea in your essay? What's one thing you learned from this essay? Right? Those types of questions. Again, not because we're trying to catch students cheating, because we want to impress upon students that their ability to synthesize what they've learned is critically important. And if they haven't demonstrated that evidence, if they can't summarize what they did, if they can't talk about the things that they learned, that doesn't mean they cheated, but it means we need to talk, or we need to slow down, or we need to go back and revisit that topic. So in the book and one of the articles that I'll share, lots of examples, prompts, questions that we can ask students to get at transparency and explainability. So those are the action steps for emphasizing integrity. We've got sample policy do and don'ts in the book. We've got sample things you can write in your syllabus to emphasize these components, and then just good instructional strategies to support integrity. Final piece, and then we'll wrap up. The the A in AI for students, agency and integrity. Agency. What is student agency? It's intentional actions that students take to take control over their learning environment. A highly agentic student might offer input, ask questions, suggest ways to better support their learning, seek personal relevance, request assistance, modeling feedback, concrete examples. Supporting student agency is so important. And that question that we started with, would your students choose the tutor who gave the answers or who just was a thought partner? Most people say, well, my students probably choose give me the answer. And that's how students treat AI tools in general. right? Here's the task. Okay. Hey, AI, do this for me, right? If we want students to move beyond that, we need to support their efforts to have agency. And here's a critique that I have of us that we need to do some introspecting on. As much as we lament students whose only questions seem to be, how many points is this worth? And can you just tell me the answer? We have to acknowledge that students didn't arrive to school that way. Kindergartners are bursting with agency to learn about the world around them. When students conclude that schooling isn't really about their learning, they'll make the logical but debilitating choice to trade agency for learning with efficiency for schooling. So we need to, if AI tools disappear tomorrow, I argue the last chapter of my book is still critically important, right? A student with agency, they pursue learning goals, they can self-assess, they ask for help, they seek and give feedback, they're persistent, they're assertive, and they can apply strategies for intentional learning. These are things that AI tools are really good at. You can ask an AI tool to give 40 different examples of something, and it will. You can tell an AI tool, I don't understand mitosis and meiosis, but I'm really into soccer or cars, or can you create an analogy that might, and it'll give it to you, okay? If kids are using AI tools in passive ways, just asking the teachers questions, they're not going to learn. If kids have a set of skills where they understand that they are in charge, they can tell that AI tool what to do in ways that will help them. That's where the potential lies. I talk about this in the February issue of Ed Leadership and specific strategies that students can use. Here's a quick example. So rather than just saying, plugging in the question, right, here are, I talk about all different prompts that we can teach students to use, whether they're trying to pursue knowledge goals or conceptual goals or procedural goals. And so these are the types of prompts we want our kids asking AI tools. Right? I'm an 8th grade student taking a science class. I'm learning how to identify different types of rocks based on important characteristics. Can you give me a 12-question multiple choice quiz on the vocabulary terms I've pasted below? Don't give me the answers. I'd like to take the assessment first. Then after I've replied, correct my assessment. We're getting feedback, okay, same as above, but rather than just scoring my answers right or wrong, provide detailed feedback. Let me know which items were correct and why. Also let me know which items were incorrect, why my response was incorrect, and what the correct answer was and why. So here are some components, right? We can teach kids similar to how we were teaching teachers. Know your goal, know the context, know the role and task, and know the boundaries. Kids can plug into these pretty quickly, okay? once they're taught how to do so. So a few questions, that for thought, and I know our time is just about done here, but what's your school's vision, right, for how AI tools, how and when AI tools can be used to support effective teaching and learning? What are some processes, procedures, resources in place to ensure teachers have the skills necessary to use AI tools in ways that are aligned and intentional? What are some resources in place to help your students have the skills to act with agency and integrity, including when using AI tools? What are some opportunities, resources, guidelines, policies in place to support this vision or develop these skills? That was a very quick and big picture overview, but I wanted to give, again, I knew there were different reasons, for people attending, and I just wanted to give a broad overview, but I can assure you in the handout that I'm going to email you in just a bit, you'll have those principles and action steps. You'll have a set of questions related to kind of where are you now and how might I be able to provide some support, and then a whole bunch of resources that drill into much more specific details about how you can move, from vision to action with some of these different components. So we've got just a couple of minutes. I don't know if there was a question in the chat, Don, that you saw, or
Say not yeah, we're just kind of waiting. If anybody has a question for Tony, I think that'd be fantastic. And Tony, I'll tell you that the one of the last slides you had shown with the color coding um, was absolutely fantastic about how it kind of broke that down. And I know I myself was just looking at that, and I think that it really helps people see the different components, and that really helps reflect on that. I know prompt writing is a key part of it for sure, but just seeing how you broke that down, I thought was really fantastic for sure.
good.
Does anybody have any questions? Feel free to throw them in the chat for Tony while you've got him here, or feel free to unmute yourself as well. We'll do either one. So if you have a direct question. Tony, while we're
So
waiting to say, what's the number one question you're getting from teachers when you get a chance to talk? Actually, no, let me go. What's the number one thing? You said you worked with over 20 student groups. I know you talked about that a little bit. Can you talk about that just a little bit more? What are you hearing from students? I think that's
yep,
fascinating. And yes, and someone asked if this is recording. We will be sharing the recording with you as well. So
yep, yeah, and we'll email some of those details. And I see from the AI transcription from Otter that those were the main ideas I was trying to emphasize. So I'll take that as some AI feedback that I was on. The student focus groups, and I'm going to publish the results of that this summer. It's still in process, but students are frustrated. I think that's how I would capture it. They believe their teachers assume that if they're using AI, they're using it to cheat. And some students would say, "Yep, because I am, but I figured out how to not get caught." That's scary. But a lot of students are essentially saying, "Show us how to use these tools." They're everywhere. I open a PDF. What do you like? A summary. I go online to Google and do a search. It's an AI, it's an AI summary. Um, uh, Almost to a T. I've heard students say, when you're given an assigned reading, are you reading it? And the response is no. They're taking pictures or uploading PDFs to AI tools and getting the summaries. The stakes are high. I talk in the book about some bigger, broader concerns about how AI might undermine students, and I had a slide on it, but to even understand how understanding works and that notion of productive struggle. And I see AI as an amplifier or a magnifying glass. And we've got to take how students are using these tools as feedback for what they think we value and what they think the purpose of school is. And I think we're in a just great space, great opportunity, because I know so many educators are concerned, and a lot of educators doing amazing creative things out there with their uses of AI tools. I think it's a good chance to take stock, step back, and really be intentional um, about not just how we use AI tools, but how we go about the process, and affirming and furthering the strengths and confronting some of the challenges related to teaching and learning. So I'd just like to say thanks. Thanks to everyone for taking some time out of your busy days to participate in this webinar. And a few minutes after we sign up, I'll send you that, or sign off. I'll send you that PDF, and please email me. I did pack in a lot. I know. Thanks, Ken. Thanks, Ken. I was reaching for a broad audience. So thanks, everybody. I'm going to follow up with that email, and you can always reach out to Don if you have any questions as well. All right.